one and all to another episode of Game Exchange. So it's Halloween, or at least it was. I guess that means it's about time for a Halloween episode of Game Exchange, huh? But what to talk about? Well, one particular game comes to mind that does a good job of amalgamating many of Japan's well-known horrors together, Monster Party. Now, I'm sure many of you remember a very popular and funny fellow who reviewed this game once before, but do allow me to fill in the gaps that the craziness of this game left behind, and perhaps this game won't be so crazy. So these guys, they're the first enemies you encounter in the game, and already you're wondering, what are these? As crazy as it sounds, I think these are flaming Japanese high school students. I draw that conclusion because these bad guys have the big hair of the 80s and that old style of male school uniforms. Now you see this thing right here? Yeah, aside from being nightmare fuel, this is what's called a Jinmenken. As freaky as they are, Jinmenken were actually pretty harmless in old Edo folklore. Weird as heck, but harmless. However, they served as a bad omen of things to come in the future. Some say they had the ability to speak like a human, but usually they would only say things like, "Leave me alone," in low, grouchy voices. People to this day still claim sighting these creepy things, but most write it off as someone in the dark catching a quick glimpse of one of Japan's many smaller primates. This guy right here is probably the strangest, most obscure boss you'll ever fight in the game. But this boss actually comes from the ghost story called Bansho Sada Sashiki. And believe it or not, this isn't the first time you've seen this. Remember this? And this? How about this? Yeah, all of this comes from the same story. As for the story itself, let me just go ahead and quote the Ningyo Jorui version of the story I found online. Hosokawa Katsumoto, the lord of Himeji Castle, has fallen seriously ill. Katsumoto's heir, Tomonosuke, plans to give a set of 10 precious plates to the shogun to ensure his succession. However, chief retainer Asayama Tetsuzan plots to take over. Tomonosuke's retainer was engaged to marry a lady-in-waiting, Okiku. Tetsuzan plans to force Okiku to help him murder Tomonosuke. Tetsuzan, through the help of a spy, steals one of the 10 plates and summons Okiku to bring the box containing the plates to his chamber. There, he attempts to seduce Okiku, but she refuses due to her love for Taketsune. Rejected, Tetsuzan has Okiku count the plates to only find 9. He blames her for the theft and offers to lie for her if she becomes his mistress. Okiku again refuses, and Tetsuzan has her beaten with a wooden sword. Then has her suspended over a well and, erotically enjoying her torture, has her lowered into the well several times, beating her himself when she's raised. He demands that she becomes his lover and assist in the murder of Tomonosuke. She again refuses, whereupon Tetsuzan strikes her with his sword, sending her body deep into the well. While wiping clean his sword, the sound of a voice counting plates comes up from the well. Tetsuzan realizes that it's the ghost of Okiku, but is entirely unmoved. So yeah, it actually makes sense to fight this kind of boss in a Japanese game. Now keep in mind, there are many interpretations of this tale. They are somewhat similar, but each have their own unique story to tell. As I've said, this ghost not only exists in Monster Party, but also in games such as Mystical Ninja for the SNES, and also games like Parodius. Konami really seemed to have a thing with this character. Now as for the ring, I think the similarities speak for themselves. The tale of Okiku is so old and so well known that it only made sense to make a movie that would borrow from the horror of the story. For those of you wondering what the story has to do with Mr. Centipede in Inuyasha, there's a species of worm that lives in old wells in Japan called Okiku Mushi, named after Okiku herself. Many people believe that Okiku reincarnated as the species of worm. Yes, I know the show said it was to be the resting place of a centipede demon, but come on, this is too similar just to be a coincidence. Remember these guys? Seems like the easiest boss fight in the world, but there's a strong cultural reference here. Now, I'm going to go out on a limb and assume that this comes from the Japanese holiday of Obon. What's Obon? It's a holiday in August where the spirits of family ancestors are believed to walk the earth in search of family, homes, and familiar things they enjoyed in life. Think of this as an Eastern Dia de los Muertos. And it's a happy time of year, but there is so much preparation for the ancestral spirits' return. Most places of work give people a solid week in August off just to prepare for the event. As for the dancing, well, Obon has massive festivals where people would dance several kinds of dances in a circle while music and taiko drums were played. I would know, I was there. Alrighty, next. It's a giant mecha. I could go on and on about how they're omnipresent in Japan, but chances are y'all already know this. Okay, next up then. Oh yeah, these guys. I know this scenario is completely bizarre, and I can't really say much about the space stations in the background, but I tell you what, if I found giant kushikatsu, I'd be all over that stuff. So what's kushikatsu? Kushikatsu is basically any sort of food that is dipped in batter and fried, and this can be anything. Shrimps, onions, green onions, tofu, pork, whole eggs, yes, whole eggs. Batter fried on a stick, anything goes. Honestly, this food is a monster of its own. Deliciously tempting, but it will kill you. The only other monster boss that's Japanese I found in this game was this sort of ghostly suit of armored boss. And that should be pretty self-explanatory. All of the other bosses are either traditional horror monsters or were just plain random as heck. Though I did read that some of these monsters were actually supposed to be copyrighted monsters that got changed at the last minute. For example, the cat in the box was originally supposed to be a gremlin. Now there are plenty of other monsters that I could go over that are constantly found in games. But, as always, I encourage you to go out for yourselves and dig around for some cultural background behind some of the weird and crazy monsters that not only Japan has, but the whole world. There are many games that have been originated in Japan, but in them, there are all kinds of monsters from all over the world. Castlevania does a great job of borrowing from a plethora of cultures when it comes to their monsters. So go for it, guys! If you love monsters, you'll be really surprised at how creative cultures can be when creating them. Anyway, that's all I have for this episode. I hope you had a happy and safe Halloween. Next time, you might want to bring your jacket, because we're taking a field trip up north to uncover culture in games that have almost been completely untouched. But until then, this is Gaijin Goomba signing out. Hey guys, like the show? If you want to check out more, like my sort of podcasty series, goofy animations, or my Gaijin Goomba IRL series, you can check them out on my personal YouTube account. Not to mention, you can keep up with the show on Facebook and Twitter. There's also a DeviantArt fan club if you have some artsy ideas. But if you want the really good stuff, check out my home on the Game Theorist channel. MatPat, Ronnie, and I have a lot of cool stuff that you can learn through your favorite video games. Don't forget to like and subscribe. It helps us more than anything.